Sometime later, on the night after this battle, there was a festival in the central square of the city. Ash raises the wooden mug of his drink and says that he now congratulates everyone on defeating those ruthless monsters and adding to their record. He says cheers with a serious expression on his face and looks straight. Many people standing in front of him also raise their mugs. Ash says loudly that they can drink as much as they want. He's paying for everything today. All the people who stand in front of him begin to rejoice loudly because of what he said. People begin to celebrate the victory, and he thinks that the festival has begun. Musicians play music on their instruments with joyful expressions on their faces. Soldiers and workers with joyful expressions on their faces pour themselves alcohol into mugs. The chefs prepare many different dishes that smell very delicious. Somewhere in the square, two men compete in arm wrestling, and one of them defeats his opponent. The soldier raises the winner's hand and says loudly that this newcomer has won. The losing man says loudly that it doesn't count. They must try again, but this time on their left hands. Ash sits alone away from them and looks from the side. He silently watches how people celebrate this victory, and a smile appears on his face. Lucas comes up to him and asks His Highness, is everything okay with him? He hasn't eaten anything all day. He should eat. Ash looks at him and agrees with him. He holds a mug of drink in his hand, and Lucas tells His Highness that his appearance is not befitting of a commander who has just won a victory. He stopped 1,000 living armor without significant casualties. It seems to him that he has reason to rejoice. Ash raises his mug to his face and says that indeed, there were no significant losses. He drank his drink and immediately spat it out because of the taste he felt. Lucas is very embarrassed by this and loudly asks His Highness if he is okay. Ash says there's nothing wrong with it. It just tastes different from what he expected. He looks at his drink and wonders if it's beer. There's at least 20% alcohol here. His face became sad, and he says that although there were no great losses, many still lost their precious lives. He thinks that when someone dies, it doesn't matter whether there were many or few of them. Every life is important and valuable. Of course, he knows that he cannot save everyone. In such a cruel game, such thoughts would be arrogant. But if he had been a little more careful, they would not have died. Everything was not like in training. He had a chance to change everything. Ash clutches his mug tightly and thinks that knowing this makes his heart feel even worse. Lucas tells His Highness that he did a great job, so there is no need to be sad. Here's what he thinks about it. However, no matter what he says, he will not be able to dispel his regrets with this. This is a holiday in honor of victory. If His Highness does not rejoice, the morale of the soldiers will not rise. He asks him to smile and at least have fun with them now. This is also part of the commander's duty. Ash looks at him with a smile, is silent for a few seconds and thinks, is a smile also part of the captain's duty? Eider suddenly crept up to them and loudly said that these were such correct words. Ash was very frightened by his appearance and turns to him. Eider, in a chef's uniform, holds a plate of vegetables and says that mourning the fallen is, of course, important, but time must also be devoted to celebrating the victory. Ash looks at him and wonders what he's even doing. Eider hands him a plate and says that eating meat alone is not very healthy, so he brought some vegetables. Ash, with a slightly dissatisfied expression on his face, says that he hasn't even eaten meat yet. Eider says with a happy expression that he congratulates him on completing the first level. It was difficult, but he did a great job. He hopes that he will continue in the same spirit. Ash is silent for a few seconds and thinks about what he says. He thinks about all this and takes a tomato that is on the plate. Immediately after this, Eider loudly says that His Highness is eating vegetables. He waves his hand and says loudly that His Highness has no meat, so he has to be content with vegetables. Ash is embarrassed by this and asks what he is doing. The rest of the people apologize very loudly to His Highness and loudly say that they have forgotten too much. Many people come running to him with worried faces, different dishes, and loudly saying that they cannot believe that they forced the prince, who ate only meat, to eat only vegetables. Ash is embarrassed by this and wonders what kind of reputation this is. What kind of life did his character have? One of the men very loudly tells these stupid idiots that they must immediately serve meat to His Highness. And also they bring all the alcohol they have. All these people are walking down the street, leading Ash and drinking alcohol from their mugs. He holds a piece of meat in his mouth and with a surprised expression on his face wonders how everything turned out this way. He planned to sit in a quiet dark corner and think about today's battle. Lily timidly grabbed him by the hem of his clothes and called His Highness. Ash turns to her, notices that she is shaking very much and wonders when did she get so drunk. Lily grabs him and, with tears in her eyes, loudly tells His Highness that she asks him to resign her. Ash smiles at her with a kind expression and tells her that she should work more. He thinks that in these times no one will resign. Maybe it would be better if he paid her more. The two magicians were surprised when they noticed her and loudly called her name. These two magicians take Lily away, who loudly says that she wants to leave already. Ash looks at her and thinks it would be better if they put her to bed. Damien sat down next to him with a mug in his hands, laughing and calling for His Highness. Ash turns to him and wonders what will happen now. Damien smiles and says that the local water is a little bitter. He begins to laugh and hiccup. Ash says that it's not water at all. He wonders who got this child drunk. He was very surprised when he noticed that Jupiter was sitting next to Damien, who was pouring alcohol into his mug. Ash calls her loudly and asks what she is doing. He's still a child. She smiles and says that he is no longer a child, but a full-fledged mercenary. He needs to learn to drink and smoke, and also learn how to spend money on different things. He is like a grandson to her, so she will teach him everything. Ash, with an angry expression on his face, asks this old woman why she would teach her grandson something like that. Damien, with a joyful expression on his face, rests his head on his shoulder, laughs and calls for His Highness. Ash looks at him with a smile and asks how dare he touch the prince's body with his head, and he became bolder. Damien, with a sad expression on his face, says that when he is alone, he begins to see the face of his dead friend. He can't stop thinking about that day. The sin of surviving without him breaks his heart. A small smile appears on his face, and he says that the strange thing is that when he is near him, he feels better. That's why he stays with him. He doesn't have time to finish because his head fell on the table, and Ash looks at this and is silent for several seconds. He thinks it's not because he's special or amazing. It's all thanks to his skill. But he cannot tell it to him. Jupiter holds a glass of alcohol in his hand with a smile and says that for some reason she feels it too. That her magic becomes stronger when she is under his command. Maybe it's because he's an excellent leader. Ash remembers the system and thinks that his leadership qualities have nothing to do with it. It's all because of his characteristics and the interaction of the group. In this battle, the buff was 25%. But how can he tell about it? Lucas, his face flushed from alcohol, says that when he stands next to His Highness, all his doubts disappear and his body becomes light and fast. This is probably all thanks to the character of His Highness and his talent for leadership. Ash smiles and asks, so that's why he's always on his side. Lucas, with a red face, asks if this could be true. Ash wonders what this means. Such an answer does not suit a knight character like him at all. A lot of people gather around them, banging their mugs on the table and saying that they must drink to their fallen comrades. For those who survived and for His Highness. Ash was surprised when he saw them and asks what's wrong with them. One of the men says with a smile that His Highness's mug is full. Ash says he just doesn't feel good. The men begin to cry, loudly apologize to His Highness, and say that they absolutely do not know how to cheer up. Because of them, the prince, who is famous for his week-long feasts, did not drink a single mug today. Ash, with a displeased expression on his face, thinks that this is happening again. What's wrong with his reputation? What kind of life did this prince live? People say loudly that they deserve to die. He should kill them. Ash loudly tells these idiots that they should stop exaggerating, they should calm down and stand up. People say that then he should have a drink with them. Ash, who is dissatisfied with what is happening, loudly asks, well, what should he do about it? He drinks alcohol from his mug and asks loudly, are they happy now? Since they made their lord and commander drink, they know what will happen next, right? They have to pour it for everyone. Immediately afterwards, they were brought many mugs of alcohol. People rejoice over this and say that they must drink it all. Ash thinks that while the moon was dimly shining in the night sky, they ate, drank, sang, and talked. The night of victory continued. Ash comes into his room and says that he drank too much. He sits down on his bed and doesn't say anything for a while. He looks at the 3 chests he received for completing the level and says that he needs to open these before he falls asleep. He touches one of the chests and says he needs to see what's inside. A bright glow appears from the chest, which greatly surprised Ash, and he loudly asks if this is a maximum level item. He takes out black gloves from this chest and looks at it and thinks, is this not only an SSR rank, but also a maximum level? He is shaking very much because of something while he is looking at these gloves. He throws these gloves at the wall and loudly asks, what is this? He wonders, out of all the possible SSR rank weapons, this is what he got. In the system window, it is written that this is a lucky strike of SSR rank, level 7. Class Combat Gloves, damage from 0 points to 777 points, strength 7 points. Increases the characteristics of allies by 1%. Ash thinks that the damage these gloves do in waves is based on randomness. He sometimes entertained people on stream with this weapon, but in practice, it is a completely useless weapon. Ash stands still, looks at these gloves and says that this is still better than nothing. He puts on these gloves and says that he shouldn't throw this away. He doesn't even have anyone to give it to. But these gloves are quite comfortable. Perhaps this is due to the fact that this is an SSR rank item. He looks at these gloves with a sad expression on his face and thinks that maybe he will get lucky a couple of times. He should think about something good. Ash can't think of a good thing and says that of all the imbalanced items that could make his life easier, this is what he got. He screams loudly with anger and loudly asks what good can happen here. He thinks that even though he received a very rare item, he was able to fall asleep only closer to the morning, because he grumbled all night because of the disorder. The next day in the early evening, Ash comes out of his room with a very tired look on his face and says that his head hurts a lot. In front of his room stands Lucas, who looks at him with a very tired expression on his face and wishes His Highness good morning. Ash looks at him for a few seconds with a surprised expression on his face and asks how he feels. He should have rested this morning. Lucas holds back the urge to gag and says loudly that he is actually His Highness's guard, as best he can. Ash looks at him and thinks that he seems to have drunk too much too. Eider comes to them with a cheerful expression on his face and wishes good morning to the two of them. Ash was surprised by this and wondered where he had so much energy. He surprised both of them very much by saying that he brought them tea with honey. They can drink it without embarrassment. Lucas drinks all the tea that was in the teapot with a very joyful expression on his face, and Ash, who drank the tea from the mug, says in surprise that it seems he is starting to come to life. He thinks, in this case, is it time to start preparing for the next level? Sometime later, Ash, along with several people, stands in front of a huge sword that is stuck in the wall. He looks at it with a calm expression on his face and says that in this state, the wall will not stop even wild animals, let alone monsters. How long will it take to fix? The president of the Masons Union looks at this and says that at least 2 weeks are needed. First, you need to somehow remove this giant sword. The system notifies that there are 9 days and 20 hours left before the start of the first level. Ash says to mobilize everyone who can stand on their feet and send them to help with the repairs. Lucas, who stands in front of him, agrees with His Highness. Ash says they should try to deal with this as quickly as possible. He asks Eider how things are going with the reinforcements. He says that new soldiers from the surrounding area will arrive soon. And tomorrow those who cleared the central region should return. Ash thinks about this and says that this means that there will be no progress until tomorrow. He thinks that he needs to do other things, and strengthening the army will have to be postponed. There is nothing left to do but pray that reinforcements will arrive on time. He tells Eider that if anything happens, he will have to report to him immediately. They must use this chance to give it their all. Lucas asks what does he mean. Ash says with a smile that they will go to the dungeon to destroy those annoying monsters in advance. Lucas asks with a worried expression on his face. So, like last time, they will go to the Black Lake. Ash says that this is exactly the case, but this time they will go down under the lake with the elite members of the squad. It's time to change the mode of defense to attack. After a while, He loudly says that that's all for today. They should rest well until tomorrow. He thinks that he only told the members of the detachment that they would go on expeditions, because instead of explaining it 100 times, he will show it once. Damien takes a crying and upset Lily away and tells His Highness that they will see each other tomorrow. Ash mentally apologizes to her and thinks that the elite squad is designed for 5. He turns and says that he must prepare everything necessary for the expedition. Eider asks what exactly does he need. Ash, with a serious expression on his face, says that he needs canned food, camping supplies, and all kinds of potions, and also lamps, lanterns, and torches. In other words, everything that can light the way. The next morning in the backyard of Lord Crossroads' estate, Jupiter with a bag behind his back says that this is impressive. And where are they going? Ash creates a portal from stones and says that soon she will see everything. The portal is activated. This surprises Jupiter, and she asks loudly if this is really a teleport. Didn't it disappear hundreds of years ago? Ash thinks she can come in and check. Why ask stupid questions? He stands in front of the portal and says that behind this portal there is a breeding ground for monsters, their refuge under the Black Lake. In fact, their kingdom is located at the bottom of the lake. Everyone except the frightened Lily looks at him with serious expressions and listens to him carefully. Ash says they are investigating this to find out why the monsters are attacking. This is the only way to end this endless war forever. He thinks that destroying the source of monsters is the true goal of this game. He presses the teleport to the lakeside destination and says that he will tell you the details later. For now, they should just follow him. Lucas tells His Highness that he should let him go first. Ash doesn't listen to him and immediately enters the teleporter, which greatly surprises him and wonders if he didn't tell him it was safe. The system notifies you that loading is in progress. Advice: the character's characteristics increase as the level increases. He must level up by earning experience points in battles. Ash wonders if all the useful hints have already ended. All other people pass through the portal and stop after crossing. Jupiter is surprised when he notices this place and is about to say something. She looks around and says that this is really the same lake. Ash calls her name and asks, has she been here before? Jupiter says that she was here 20 years ago, when there were still royal soldiers in Crossroad. Then they received orders to dry up the lake. Ash asks if they tried to fill this whole lake with dirt. It seems that 20 years ago, the commander was not the best either. Jupiter says that many battle mages have been summoned. Together they filled the lake with soil. However, Ash interrupts her by asking what happened then. Jupiter, who remembers what happened at that time, says that it turned out to be impossible to fill this lake. No matter how much earth and rock fragments they sent there, the lake did not become smaller. Rumors quickly spread throughout the royal army that this lake was connected with the abyss itself. A week later, monsters appeared. There were huge crowds of them, the troops were forced to retreat, and the plan failed. Then she visited here for the first time. They continue to stand in front of the lake, and Ash says that they should be on guard, because they are going to go deep. This news greatly shocked Lily, causing her to start crying and shaking violently out of fear. A system window appears in front of Ash, in which it is written, "Does he really want to enter the kingdom under the lake?" He immediately presses the button and thinks that of course he wants this. A red system window appears in front of him with a warning, which says that he will not be able to return until he reaches the checkpoint. Does he still want to continue? Ash thinks it doesn't scare him at all. How many times do they think he played this game? He clicked on the system window and a whirlpool appeared in the lake, and he realized that the passage was opening. He says they should go ahead. After that, he immediately dives into the lake and goes down very quickly. The system notifies you that loading is in progress. He goes into the dungeon. Advice: the most common cause of death is negligence. He must always be on guard. Ash continues to dive and thinks that it is very dark here. Both in the game and now, this is his first reaction to this place. It's incredibly dark here. Nothing is visible at all. He hears some sounds and thinks that only some sounds are heard here. The number of different sounds becomes louder, and Ash thinks that he feels as if darkness is quickly approaching him. Lucas, who happened to be next to him, loudly calls His Highness several times and asks where he is. Ash says he is here. He need not worry. Everyone must remain calm and light their torches. Lucas was the first to light the torch, but the light barely illuminated the few meters around him. Everyone else also uses different methods of lighting and looks around, but the darkness is so thick that they cannot see more than a few meters around them. Lily uses her fire magic to light up the place, and with a very scared look on her face asks where they are. Lucas and Jupiter notice something in front of them that really surprised them. He asks His Highness with a worried expression, "What is this place?" They stand in front of a huge gate that leads to a huge and dark kingdom, and Ash says that this place is called the Kingdom Under the Lake. More precisely, a dungeon at the bottom of the lake. And also, this is the home of monsters that they have to destroy, one by one. He looks around and thinks that he can breathe here, and also his movements are not limited in any way. This is most likely due to the ancient magic surrounding the city. Lily looks at this kingdom with great surprise and asks how such a huge city could be hidden underwater. And why can they move here? Lucas turns around sharply and says loudly that they should be quiet. Someone is coming towards them. He turned out to be right, and someone is indeed walking towards them barefoot. All the people from the group are wary and look at this silhouette that is walking in their direction. This person turned out to be a girl with long white hair, a large sword on her back, who was wearing a black cape with a hood. Ash restrains the panicking Lily and says that they should remain calm, because this is not the enemy. He thinks this is the first time they have entered the dungeon. So this is most likely an NPC guide. The girl stops in front of them and asks, "Are they treasure hunters who have come for the riches of the kingdom?" Ash is a little confused that everything is not going as he remembers and wonders what this means. This girl, whose face became visible because she came closer, says in a calm voice that they will not find what they are looking for here. They should return to the surface while they can. Ash looks at her with a slightly worried expression and thinks that he has never seen her before. Was there such an NPC in the game at all? An abyss at the bottom of the lake, populated by many NPCs. There are about 100 of them here. Usually it is the NPC guide who appears at the entrance. He replayed this game 742 times, but he had never seen such an NPC. Well, it's not that important. Ash takes a step towards this girl and says that they came from the surface to end the source of the monsters. The unknown girl looks at him with indifference and says nothing. Ash, with a serious expression on his face, says that the outside world is suffering because of the monsters that break through to the surface. They came here to put an end to it. The girl says that the invasion of monsters will never end. No one has yet been able to stop this because the cycle is endless. Many great warriors led by peerless heroes tried to break the curse of this place, but they all failed. They shouldn't set foot in this room. They need to get back to the surface before it's too late. Before they are swallowed up by the abyss of despair and regret. Ash looks at her silently with an indifferent expression on his face and thinks that, of course, he will run away if she just says this. He says that he is the Lord of Crossroad, a stronghold of protection against monsters. He has the responsibility to protect the fort, or rather even to protect all humanity from these monsters. He is not afraid of the darkness, so they will enter the city and destroy the source of the monsters. This is what they came here for. But the passage inside is closed, so they cannot enter. If there is another way, then he asks her to lead them. The girl looks at him silently for several seconds and thinks about what he said. She agrees to this and says that she even wonders whether his words come from the heart or are just reckless bravado. She starts walking slowly in a certain direction and says that they should follow her. She will guide them through. Ash asks how can they contact her. Does she have a name? The girl with a sad expression on her face turns to him, is silent for several seconds, trying to remember it, and says that she does not remember her name. If they want, they can call her Mumyum. A quarter of an hour after they decided to follow her. Lucas, with a worried expression on his face, asks His Highness why they are following some stranger. This could be a trap. Ash, with a calm expression on his face, says that everything will be fine, so he can be calm and just keep walking. They continue to walk, and he thinks that he says something almost every 5 minutes. Mumyung stops and says it's here. She turns around and says that if they pass here, they can get inside the city. Ash stands next to her, looks at the passage, and says that this place is a sewer system. Mumyung says it's slippery here, so they have to be careful. They all go inside together, and Ash thinks that this way they hunched over and walked through the narrow tunnel for 5 minutes. After some time, they found themselves in the first location, a dried-up sewer. Ash thinks that they have finally reached the first location of the kingdom under the lake. He says this is where all the sewer drains converge. All the pipes are dry, and there is not a single drop of water here. Ash activates a portal made of stones that were lying not far from here. The system notifies that the first location, the dry sewer control point, has been passed. Conservation was successful. Ash thinks that the checkpoint is a safe zone where monsters cannot enter. Next time they can start right here. Lily cries with her face red with fear, calls for His Highness, and loudly asks if she can go home already. Ash turns her down and wonders if she really thinks they carried all that equipment this far to turn back. Mumyon says that this is where she will leave them. Their future fate is in their hands. Ash pushes Lily away, who wants to leave here, turns away from her, and thanks her for leading them here. Mumyon sighs and says with an indifferent expression that she will give them one last warning. The kingdom has already been completely swallowed up by chaos. The further they advance, the stronger and more terrible the monsters will be. If they intend to enter the abyss, no matter what, then she will give them advice. They should never turn off the light. All the people from Ash's team look at her with serious expressions and say nothing. Mumyon says she hopes the gods will guide them. After she said this, she went into a dark tunnel without any light source. Lucas asks, who is this strange woman? How can she live in this terrible place? Ash says he doesn't know that. Damien, with a worried expression on his face, tells the prince that this darkness is somehow strange. Even with his eyes, he can't see anything. This darkness seems to be alive. How does that woman walk in such darkness without a torch? Ash is silent and wonders how he can know this. This dungeon is still full of secrets that even he, who cleared the map on the hellish difficulty of Man of Steel, knows nothing about. There is only one thing he is sure of. He says that they will definitely meet again, then he can ask her. He thinks that they will definitely meet again here, at the bottom of the lake. As enemies or allies, it doesn't matter. He asks if everyone is ready. He thinks that at the checkpoint they were armed to the teeth. In the window, the system says, first location, dried up sewerage. Clearing progress, normal rooms 0 out of 3, boss rooms 0 out of 1. Ash says with a smile that with such a level of the squad, clearing should not be much of a problem. They all approach the dark tunnel leading to the city, and he says that they can move out. They walk and Lucas says that this is the main corridor of this sewer. He looks around and asks how long this corridor is. Ash says with a calm expression that this will end soon. He thinks that the standard dungeon structure is a series of rooms and corridors. In these rooms you need to fight enemies and find objects. Sometimes NPCs can be found here. So they are waiting for them in the first room. He pauses and notices a large rat opening wide and making very loud noises. A red system window appears in front of him, in which it is written that he must destroy the enemies. Dried up sewer. First room, giant sewer rat. 14 third-level creatures. All these monsters simultaneously begin to run towards the human team. Ash smiles and thinks that he shouldn't relax, because they attack at the same time, but these rats themselves are quite weak. Lily, with a very frightened expression on her face, screams and says that these are rats. Ash was very embarrassed by her reaction and wondered if she was now going to be afraid for any reason. He waves his hand and loudly tells Lucas that he must stand on the front line, but at the same time keep his distance and stop anyone who gets too close. He immediately took out his sword, runs towards the rats and agrees with His Highness. Ash loudly tells Damien that these monsters have strong enough skulls, so he should aim for the eyes or neck. He immediately activates his ability, aims his crossbow, and agrees with the prince. Ash loudly tells the mages that they should not waste power unnecessarily. They should only attack those who break through Lucas. He thinks that at this time he will probably just look from the side. Lucas lands several quick strikes and kills the rats that tried to attack him. Damien fires a few shots from his crossbow using his skill. All his shots hit the weak points of these monsters and kill them. Sometime later, when they had defeated all the giant rats in that room, Ash says they're all great. They did a great job, didn't they? Damien agrees and says he was worrying about it for nothing. Lucas turns around and tells His Highness that there are only 13 monsters here. Should he collect their magic crystals? Ash refuses and says that these monsters have low ranks, so their magic crystals are cheap. He was embarrassed when he heard what he said. He wonders, did he say that there are only 13 monsters here? The information box said there should be 14 of them. He was surprised when he realized what was happening, and at that moment the last rat was above him. This rat attacks him with loud noises, and Ash immediately turns around at this sound. He was very frightened by this and screamed loudly. He delivers a strong blow with his fist, and a system window appears in front of him, in which it is written, "Jackpot." The drum in the system window stops, and it shows the number 121. With this blow, he threw the giant rat very hard, and this monster flies very quickly across the room. The rat hits the wall very hard and leaves blood on the wall due to this attack. Ash was very surprised by what happened and thinks that it was a lucky blow. It's usually difficult to get more than 100 points of damage. Lucas asks His Highness with a worried expression, "Is he okay?" A confused Ash agrees with him and says that he is fine. Lucas looks at him with a surprised expression on his face and asks what happened just now. How did he kill this monster in one blow? Ash is thinking. Surely he can't tell him that he gets chests for every clearing and that when he upgrades, he can choose a development line. He shows his fist and says that this is the prince's signature blow. Lucas was surprised by this and asks if he called it the prince's blow. Ash agrees and loudly says that this is his signature move. There is nothing unusual about it. If a royal is cornered, they can activate superpowers, but only occasionally. He has an embarrassed expression on his face and thinks that he should quickly express his surprised reaction and they will move on. Lucas really surprised the others by having a very surprised expression on his face and saying that this is impressive. Ash looks at this and thinks that he probably couldn't convince anyone else besides him. But they didn't ask any questions and moved on peacefully. Sometime later in the second, empty room of the dried-up sewer. Ash says that there must be something hidden here. They should search this room well. Damien finds a hidden passage and asks what's in there. Ash is happy about this and says that he did a great job. He is counting on him. Damien tells the prince that he has found a treasure chest. Ash says it's great, but he has to be careful. This could actually be a trap. The system notifies that the passive skill gold rush is activated and Jupiter, with a crazy expression on his face, runs to this chest and laughs very loudly. Ash was very surprised by what this greedy old woman was doing and wondered, what if there was a trap there? She opens this chest from which a bright glow appears, and he thinks that he is very happy that it turned out to be a treasure chest. Jupiter came to her senses after opening this chest, asks for forgiveness, and says that as soon as she smells money, she immediately loses her mind. She hands the chest to His Highness and says he can take it. Ash looks at her and wonders, is she really going to pretend like nothing happened? After that, they go to the next room and the system notifies that they must destroy the enemies in the third room of the dried-up sewer. Level 3 giant sewer rat. Ash thinks clearing the third room was easy. And then they finally got to the boss's room. They stop in front of a huge door, and he says that they have arrived. He turns around and says with a small smile that after this room they will be heading home, so there is no slowing down. They slowly open this huge door that leads to the boss's room and go inside this room. In this room, there are many bloody corpses of rats on the floor. Ash covers his nose with his hand because of the terrible smell and asks what is it. He thinks the place smells incredibly strongly of blood. In this room, there is a huge rat sitting with its back, which in a terrifying voice says that there is no end to these rats. This monster squeezes the smaller rat and says that we need to get rid of the rats. It squeezes this rat very hard and says that he must eradicate and cleanse everything of rats. This monster stands up to his full height and loudly says that he must do this to restore the kingdom under the lake. Damien was very surprised by this and asked if this monster speaks with a human voice. The huge monster heard what he said and moved its ears. It immediately turns around and asks, "Are there really any living rats left here?" The system window says they must defeat the boss. Boss room, dried up sewer. Giant ratman of the 15th level, head of the sewer service, Peleg. The monster loudly says that no matter how many he kills, the rats still come back. Ash looks at this with a surprised expression on his face and wonders, is this the head of the sewerage service Peleg? Why does a ratman have the same status as a human? This monster runs very quickly towards them and says very loudly that he will kill them all. Ash looks at this and thinks he should say something. He does not have time to do anything because Lily releases fire from her palms, cries and screams loudly with a frightened expression on her face. The rats that she hits with her magic begin to scream very loudly in pain and say that they are hot. Lily continues to shoot a huge amount of fire from her palms for a long time and loudly says that they should not come close to her. The Peleg, which she hit with jets of fire, lies on the ground and smoke comes from it. He raises his head and says in an angry voice that she is a damn rat. Jupiter points his finger at him, from which lightning emanates and says that he can stop here. Good night. After she said this, she shot lightning through the head of this huge monster. A very strong lightning pierces the entire body of this monster, and it screams loudly in pain. Peleg falls to the ground and says that he must clear everything of rats. Ash looks at this in surprise and says that it was fast. He thinks that thanks to the two magicians working together, defeating the boss was easy. A characteristic feature of a monster at an early stage of development is that it has practically no resistance to magic. If they only fought with physical attacks, it would be difficult. Lily asks His Highness loudly with a frightened expression, "They are going home now, right?" Ash agrees and says that they will be back soon. Is she really that afraid? Lily says loudly that the whole room is filled with dead rats. Isn't this creepy? They all come together to a large chest that stands at the end of the room. Above this chest, there was a system window that said it was a boss room treasure chest. Ash turns around and tells Lucas that he must hold Jupiter tightly. He immediately agrees with His Highness. He lifts her up and she screams loudly and says that he has to let her go. Where is his respect for elders? Ash at this time opens the chest and says that he will see what is inside. He takes out a sword with a strange blade from which a blue glow emanates and looks at it with a surprised expression on his face. In the system window, it is written that this is a rat killer sword of R rank 15. This is a long sword, attack from 20 to 25 points, strength from 20 to 25 points. When used against rats, damage increases by 25%. Ash thinks it's a useful thing. He gives this sword to Lucas and says that he should take it. He takes this sword and thanks His Highness. Ash says that this sword is not good enough to replace his main sword, but he should keep it because they might need this sword. Lucas agrees with His Highness. Ash looks into the chest again and asks if there is anything else there. He finds a summon scroll that summons an automatic defense turret. He thinks that this thing can be guaranteed to be obtained from the first zone. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he came here solely for this purpose. They found everything they needed, so there's no need to linger here any longer. He says that now they can get out of here. Lily is very happy about what he said. The system notifies that the zone has been cleared. First zone, dried up sewer cleared. They all leave together and Ash thinks that the sewer ended after the corridor that was connected to the boss's room. He looks in surprise at something in front of him and thinks that now they are inside the kingdom of the lake. They went into the second area, called the back streets. Ash looks at this and thinks that these are the streets of a prosperous city, since even the nooks and crannies look like this. A city that personifies a magical civilization. This is the true essence of the kingdom under the lake. But even in such an advanced city, there is not a grain of light or even one living soul. This city is plunged into oblivion. They approach the portal, which Ash activates, and the system notifies that the second zone, the back alley checkpoint, has been passed. The location is unlocked. Please note that for now he cannot go beyond this zone. Ash looks at the portal in front of him and thinks that he doesn't think it's worth going further now, because they could easily be killed there. He says that everyone did a great job. That's all for today. He clicks on the system window and is about to teleport to the shore of the lake. Ash smiles and says they are going home now. The system notifies you about this. That free research has been completed and a reward has been issued. Increasing the level of squad members, Ash is level 9, Lily is level 20, Damien is level 21. In front of the portal, which closed, some unknown person came and stopped. He holds a flute in his hand and says that this is him, the last player. He came all this way to get here. He begins to play his flute, and a large army of giant rats gathers around him. This man was wearing a mask with a long smile on his face, and he says that he must forgive their sins. All these rats walk next to him, and he says that this is all for the sake of the kingdom under the lake. At the same time, Ash, along with the others, comes out of the portal and says that they are all great. They should rest well this night. Lily sits with a very tired expression on her face, and Jupiter says that because of what happened, she definitely won't be able to sleep. Who would have known that there was such a huge place under the lake? What is happening there is simply incomprehensible. This darkness is definitely not simple. Maybe His Highness will explain to them what's what. Ash thinks it over and says it's hard to explain. He thinks that even though he completed the game completely, nothing was explained to him. The kingdom under the lake has simply always been like this. He has his guesses, of course. It feels like he will be able to understand something if he breaks into the very center of the city. And then he will reveal all these secrets. He says that they will deal with everything gradually. Jupiter says she definitely won't be able to sleep today. At least sober for sure, so she'll go to the bar. Lily says loudly that she wants to go too, so they can go together. She also feels like she won't be able to sleep. Jupiter takes her away and says that it won't be possible to say more precisely. She knows one wonderful place. Ash stands still and looks at them and thinks that they seem to be working well together. Damien smiles and says that he will probably return to the temple. He's a little scared of the darkness, but it seems he will feel better after prayer. Ash agrees with him and says that he should rest. He turns around and says that they should go and rest too. Lucas agrees with His Highness. They leave and he asks, will they go to the dungeon again later? Ash says they won't go until the next siege. What is it? Lucas asks if they can figure out what monsters will be next. Ash smiles and says they already did that. Next time they encounter a pack of sewer rats. He thinks that the kingdom under the lake is infested with hordes of monsters. During reconnaissance, they usually encounter those who attack next time. They reach the limit of their numbers, spread to the borders, and from there they go out to their city. Ash says that the monsters they encounter in nearby locations while exploring are the ones that will attack them next time. Lucas was surprised by this and says that he understood it. They go inside the house and Ash loudly tells Eider that they are back. He hopes that food and bath are already ready. Eider runs up the stairs towards them with a worried look on his face and loudly tells my lord that they have a problem. Ash asks what problem is he talking about. Eider, with a worried expression on his face, says loudly that there will be no reinforcements. The capital and provinces say they will not be able to send reinforcements. Ash was very surprised by what he said and asks what does this all mean. They both fall silent because they heard Lucas's stomach growl very loudly. He apologizes to His Highness with an embarrassed expression. Ash looks at him and wonders why he is sad now. In any case, he cannot influence this in any way. He says loudly that they will think about all this tomorrow, and now he must bring them food. The next day, he asks, why won't there be reinforcements? Eider says that war recently broke out on the Western Front, and the Empire sent all its forces there. They collect all the soldiers from all regions and transfer them to the Western Front. There are simply no extra troops that can be used for reinforcements now. Ash looks at him with a suspicious expression on his face and thinks that something is wrong here. The Empire is always at war with someone. Regardless of the time of year or day, battles with neighbors have always been, are, and will be. Why did they suddenly decide to pull all the soldiers from the south right now? And it was purely by chance that it happened exactly when he requested reinforcements. He asks, what about mercenaries? Was he able to hire someone? Eider says they've already hired everyone they had, and there aren't many new ones coming in. Ash thinks that only a couple of days have passed since the last battle. It would be foolish to expect the mercenary guild to fill up immediately. What should he do now? He noticed that Eider was smiling while looking at him, grabbed his head and loudly asked why he was smiling. Or does he know a way to quickly recruit troops? Eider is confused by this and says that he actually knows such a method, but it will be very problematic. Ash, with a displeased expression on his face, asks loudly if he really thinks he cares right now. They now have to worry about the next level that is coming soon. He should tell him how to get more soldiers. Eider continues to smile and says that he will tell him everything. He should follow him. Sometime later, the three of them stand on the street together with the horses. Lucas climbed onto his horse and asks the manager where they will have to go. Idero greatly surprises everyone present by saying that they are heading to the former manager. They are going to the mansion of the Margrave of Cross. Ash thinks that Margrave is a title given to counts of strategically important border regions. Since they need to protect their borders from enemy countries, monsters, and natural disasters, Margraves have more power than ordinary counts. In other words, they are not just pampered nobles from the provinces, but military commanders in charge of defense. They all gallop together, and Eider says that when the first peasants migrated to Crossroad, the Margrave Cross was already ruling this city. In fact, the fort itself is named after him. The road built by the Cross family and the fort at its base is Crossroad. He has protected this place from the very beginning, and he also comes from a rather illustrious family. Ash asks why is he a former manager then? He thinks that this front is quite far from the center. Frankly speaking, here the Margrave would have more power than the Emperor. But he renounced his status as a landlord and forced a man from the capital to be sent here. That's why he became the new lord of these lands. Did he just up and abandon the land of his ancestors? Why did he do this? Eider says that everything is quite complicated there. It will be easier if he asks him personally. Sometime later, they see a large building and he says that they have arrived. They stop at the entrance and he says that this is something like the country residence of the Earl of Cross. After he renounced his position as Margrave, he moved here. Ash examines this place, which no one cares for, and asks if someone really lives here. Eider says that of course it is. He regularly sends provisions here. They go inside. They are noticed by an old man who came out of the building and asks who is there. This old man holds a bottle of alcohol in his hand and asks with an angry expression how dare they come here. They must get away from his house. Eider runs to him, joyfully waves his arms and asks the respected Margrave how he is doing. The old man calmed down and asked, is he his successor? They haven't seen each other for a long time. Ash looks at this with a surprised expression on his face and wonders what this idiot told him. Is this the Margrave? That old alcoholic Margrave of Cross? Is he really the past lord of the city? Eider smiles and tells the respected Margrave that he must greet his comrades. He brought guests here. The old man asks what guests he is talking about. Didn't he tell him that he should take away everyone who came to him? Eider asks him to at least listen to them. He points with his hand and says loudly that this, by the way, is the new landlord. His Highness Ash Bonhatter Everblack. Ash smiles and says that he is glad to meet the former Margrave of Cross. He is the Emperor's youngest son and the new Lord of Crossroad City. He thinks that even though his character is a tyrant prince, the Margrave, even a former one, needs to be shown at least a little respect. This is annoying, but he will have to speak formally. He will speak to him the same way as a private to a superior. He continues to smile and says that he would really like to talk to him about it. The Margrave does not listen to him and says that he must leave here. This shocked Ash very much, and with a stunned expression on his face, he asks what did he say. The old man raises his voice greatly and says that he said that he should leave here. Does he even hear him? Ash is very angry about what happened and thinks that he is already crossing all boundaries. The Everblack Empire is a state with a strict hierarchy system. Even if this old man was a Margrave, how dare he treat the prince so rudely? Also demand that he leave here. Ash, with a very angry expression on his face, asks this Margrave what he allows himself to do. The old man took out a large spear and shield, looks at it, and Ash says that he will remind him of what is in the hierarchical system between them. He calmed down and said that although it doesn't matter. He slowly walks in the other direction from this old man and wonders who in their right mind would dare point a weapon at a member of the imperial family. The Margrave points his spear at him and loudly says that he must leave here. Ash thinks that only a real madman could do this, and he must avoid meeting such crazy people at all costs. The Margrave loudly says that they must leave here immediately while he uses words. Ash says that he will come back and hopes that by then he will learn to communicate normally. The Margrave says loudly that they must not come near him again and must leave him alone. Do they understand this? Ash restrains a very angry Lucas and says that he should be more patient. He thinks this Margrave's full name is Charles Cross. He never appeared in Empire Defense. The reason he didn't get involved with this old man is because he is the father of the best tank in the game, Evangeline Cross. She has very cool SSR rank abilities, and she is also one of the most popular characters. He would have to find a way to negotiate with this old man. If all goes well, he will be able to recruit his daughter. They ride horses and Ash asks. He was wondering how this old man would solve his problems with the troops. Eider says that the Margrave of Cross has his own personal army. They are elite soldiers who are deeply loyal to him. If they can come to an agreement, this will seriously ease their situation with the army. Ash thinks about all this and says that they need to come to an agreement one way or another. But it's hard to look at him without sadness. What kind of dialogue can we talk about? Eider says that actually, there is one way. Ash was surprised when he heard this, looks at him and asks what kind of method is this. Eider says that sometimes only an alcoholic can become close to another alcoholic. Ash looks at this with a disappointed expression and thinks that he wants to live a virtuous and noble life. But it seems this world will not allow him to do so. Sometime later, Ash returned to the Cross family estate, calling him and asking loudly, "Is the Margrave here?" Cheryl goes outside and asks loudly, "Is he tired of living?" He had already warned him. He must not come close to him again. He notices a cart covered with a cloth and asks, "What is that there?" Ash picks up this cloth and asks, "What does he think?" He says with a smile that this is his favorite thing. He thinks his character was known as absolute trash. A prince who leads a riotous lifestyle is a disappointment in every sense. So it wouldn't surprise anyone if he came here with a lot of expensive alcohol. He takes out one of the bottles and tells the Margrave that they can drink together. Or does he not drink anymore? Cheryl was very surprised when he heard this and says that he is wrong. Who even told him that he didn't want this? He tells His Highness with a joyful expression that he should go inside and take it all with him. Ash thinks the good thing is that it's easy to read. At the same time, Lily sleeps in her room and imagines Ash as an evil monster from whom her wheelchair protects her. At the same time, Cheryl opens the door to her estate and says he can come inside. Ash walks into this estate and asks what is it. He notices several bottles lying on the floor and smells a very strong smell. He covers his nose with his hand and thinks that there is a very strong smell of alcohol in here. He doesn't just like alcohol, he's a real alcoholic. Cheryl puts 2 glasses on the table and says that he hasn't had a drink with someone else for a very long time. Ash looks at this glass with a dissatisfied expression and asks, "Is it really clean?" Cheryl says that even if his house is so dirty, the cups should be clean. Isn't this a sign of respect for alcohol? He quickly grabs the bottle that Ash brought and says that they should see what he brought. He looks at this bottle with great surprise and says that this is royal whiskey from the first year of production, Peacemaker. It's priceless. Ash thinks Peacemaker is the nickname of the first emperor. The batch of the drink itself was made in the year of his coronation. This is incredibly expensive alcohol. He spent money on alcohol that was so expensive for him, so he hopes it won't let him down. That's the message this action was meant to convey to everyone. He doesn't have time to finish his toast because he notices that Charles has already started drinking. He puts away the empty glass with a happy expression and says that as expected from a quality drink. It's even prepared differently. Ash, surprised by what happened, asks if he drinks it like this. Will he be able to at least appreciate the taste? Cheryl asks if he wants to compare it to the cheap drinks he usually drinks. Shouldn't he drink it the same way? In this way, he can make fair judgments. Ash looks at him with a surprised expression and wonders, is this how it works? It's better not to argue. He himself doesn't really like to drink, so how would he know? He says that anyway, today he would like to talk to him about. Cheryl interrupts him and says he shouldn't bring up another topic. He should just drink and can leave if he wants to talk about something else. Ash says he should at least give him something to eat. He looks at the silent old man in front of him and thinks that this old drunkard cannot drink on an empty stomach. Cheryl puts a small bag on the table and says he can eat it. Ash looks at it and asks, "What is it?" Cheryl says that these are dried fruits that he himself grew in his orchard. Ash looks at him with a dry fruit in his hand and asks if he has his own garden. Cheryl asks if he can't see this garden through the window. It is located directly behind the estate. It's a small garden. He even likes to spend time there. Ash thanked him for this, tries it, but because of the taste, he immediately spits it out. He looks at it and asks loudly, "What is this?" It is very sour, but at the same time bitter. "How can you even eat this?" Cheryl, with a calm expression on her face, takes this dried fruit and asks, does he dare to spit out the fruits of his many years of labor? What kind of ignorance is this? He tries it and immediately spits it out, and Ash says loudly that he himself is not able to eat it. Cheryl wipes her mouth and says how disgusting this is. He grew this fruit, but it tastes like garbage. He pushes it towards Ash and says that this is a gift for him. He should take it. He was indignant about this and loudly asked why he was giving such an inedible gift if he couldn't even eat it himself. Cheryl pours herself a glass of whiskey and says that if it tasted good, he wouldn't give it to him. He should think better about it. Why is he surrounded by only idiots? Ash looks at him with a little surprise and wonders how he does it. He says nonsense, but for some reason it sounds convincing. Cheryl looks at the dried fruit in his hand and says that he doesn't understand anything. Crossroad is located in the northernmost part of the continent. The day length is above average, and the soil is fertile. He heard that it was impossible to find a better place for growing fruit. Ash is surprised by this and loudly asks why it tastes so bad then. Cheryl says that he himself doesn't know this. Here any crop, not just fruits, should grow. You just have to sow. Maybe it's the monsters that constantly come to these lands. For sure, monsters are trampling their fields and killing farmers. Even when monsters die, they poison the land with their filth. He knows how this happens, right? Where defilement has spilled, even the soil becomes cursed and plants simply refuse to grow in it. Therefore, there are no fields around Crossroad. Margrave Cross's wistful gaze fell on his glass filled with golden alcohol, which was made from high-quality fruits and grains, which will never grow on his land. Ash looks out the window and asks, then why did he work on this garden? Cheryl starts drinking from her glass and asks, everyone has at least one regret in their life, right? This garden is his regret. With such thoughts, he won't even be able to drink normally. Ash pours alcohol for the Margrave and asks, he knows what business he came to him for. Cheryl asks if he didn't tell him to leave right away with his talk. Ash hits the table very hard with the bottle, making a loud noise, and says he can chase it away if he wants. He will still say what he has to say. The monsters keep coming, and their numbers are huge. Cheryl looks at him with a serious expression and remains silent while he talks. Ash says that last time they were barely able to fend off a legion of living armor. They were able to stop this attack, but the walls of the city were badly damaged, and the losses among the soldiers could not even be calculated. They are now in desperate need of military support. He needs their soldiers. Cheryl tells this guy that he doesn't have any soldiers. Ash asks what about his personal army that served his family for years. Cheryl says that all that remains of them are friends whom he trained in his time and with whom he went through many battles. But as soon as he renounced his title, as soon as he betrayed his faithful spear and shield, those friends also abandoned their weapons and ran away. They all resigned. Ash says with a persistent look on his face that he can call them back into service. Cheryl calmly drinks her alcohol and says it's no use. He looks at the dry fruit in his hand and says that this land is not worth protecting. Ash asks in confusion what is he talking about. Cheryl asks why waste innocent lives trying to protect a useless border. It would be better to just evacuate everyone. Ash looks at him and thinks that hearing something like this from a man whose ancestors swore to protect these lands and passed on their will to their descendants is disappointing. Cheryl raises her head and asks the prince how he got into this wasteland in the first place. Here only death awaits him, like all living things around him. He looks at him with a very serious expression on his face and says that he must listen to the advice of the elder, who put all his youth into protecting these lands. He must escape from here as quickly as he can. He must do this before this damned place consumes him too. After these words, Ash leaves the estate and heads towards the horse. Lucas, who was waiting for him, asks His Highness how it went. Was he able to convince him? Ash says that he didn't succeed, but he received this generous gift. But as it seems to him, not everything is finished yet. Lucas asks, so is he going back there? Ash says his work shouldn't go to waste. Lucas says he was curious about something. Why did he still give up the title? Ash says he feels like the Margrave has been through a lot. Does he know anything about this? Lucas refuses and says he doesn't know anything about it. Ash looks away and says that Eider told him that it would be easier to ask this old man directly. He thinks this freak is too cunning. He says they will have to work with what they have. They need to try to do their best. He wonders what else they can do. They must fix the wall and prepare for war. No matter what he does, the monsters will still come. So he must focus on preparation and formulate a strategy that will allow him to destroy the monsters with the available forces. Ash says that they should return to Crossroad because they have a lot to do. In the system window, it is written that the second wave will consist of an unknown boss and 3,251 large sewer rats of the 5th level. The next morning, when the Great Sword was removed from the city wall, the president of the Masons Union stands at the huge gap that remains from the sword and says that they have finally destroyed the huge sword that was stuck in the wall. Today, they will remove the fragments and begin to restore this wall. Ash looks around and says that they should take the fragments not very far. It would be better to place it in front of the wall. This will serve as an excellent barricade. He thinks it will be ideal against a crowd of rats. He asks how long will it take to repair the wall. The president says the wall's condition is worse than they originally thought, so Ash doesn't listen to him and says that he should say it faster. How long does it take? The president says that counting today, they need 10 days. Ash thinks about this and thinks that they have about a week left until the next siege. Time is too short. He thinks that the embodiment of the architecture of the Empire is the Crossroad Wall. He knows very well that a couple of large stones will not fix it. He says that he will take care of hiring workers and materials. So they should try their best, but complete the repair within a week. The president was surprised by this and wants to object to His Highness. Ash looks at him with a very angry expression on his face and asks, what is it? He listens to him carefully. He thinks that it is already clear that this task is extremely difficult, but they have no other choice, so they will have to hurry. He remembers how many monsters there will be in the second wave and thinks that this is a harsh reality. More than 3,000 dog-sized rats they met in the dungeon will come here. They really need the wall to be intact. The president cries and says with a sad expression that they will try their best. Ash pats him on the shoulder and tells him that he is grateful for his dedication and dedication. He turns to the rest of the workers and says that they should listen to him carefully. They have a tight deadline. They must hurry up to work if their lives are dear to them. After a few days. During the day, he supervised the renovation work, and at night he drank alcohol with the Margrave of Cross in his mansion. They hardly spoke to each other and just tirelessly raised their glasses of alcohol. The defensive line was gradually restored, but the same cannot be said about his health. He drank huge quantities of good and not very good alcohol for several hours in a row. After 4 days of going through the same scenario in complete silence, the Margrave finally could not stand it. Cheryl asks this guy, has he ever been in love? Ash is surprised by this question and asks what he means. Cheryl says he wondered if he loved anyone. He waits for a few seconds for his answer, but he didn't answer anything, and so he says that apparently not. And if you think about it, there was no one at all? Ash, with a thoughtful expression on his face, wonders if he had a lover. On Earth, even before he became a game streamer, he was a loner. No one really swore their love to him, and he did not consider it necessary to waste time on this. He simply lived like a lonely person. Then he started streaming. His platform grew, and he received love from his viewers. He imagines the faces of his viewers who wrote to him that he loved him. How long can he twerk for? Here's 100,001 for him at the moment. Ash pushes away the thoughts of this and thinks that this was their one-sided love for him. Anyway, no matter how hard he thinks, he covers his face with his hand and says that he had no one. Cheryl tells this kid that he's had a hard life. Ash looks at him silently for several seconds with a dissatisfied expression on his face. He points his finger at him with an angry expression on his face and asks, "Is this something that someone who drinks alone in his house would say?" Cheryl starts laughing out loud because of this, and he asks then what about him? Did he love anyone? He looks at his glass of alcohol with a small smile and says that he loved it. It was his wife. She is the only person he loved all his life. But she died 3 years ago. Ash was surprised when he heard this and stares at him silently for a few seconds. Cheryl pours alcohol into her glass and says that the monsters killed her to pieces in this very garden. There was nothing even to put in the coffin. He looks at the table with a sad expression and says that every lord of these lands is haunted by misfortune. I think it could be called a curse. A fortress or a person he values, there will definitely come a time when he will have to choose between these two options. There have been no exceptions yet. From the founding lords of the distant past to his grandfather and father, no one had been able to escape this curse. Cheryl's hand shakes very violently as he reaches for his glass. He looks at it with a sad expression on his face and thinks that it has caught up with him too. Over the past couple of decades, monsters have shown almost no activity. Peace reigned in the fortress, but income began to fall. Finances were very bad, so he had to open his own business. Then his wife suggested setting up a farm south of the fort. Ash was surprised when he heard this and asks if he means outside the fort. Cheryl agrees and says that the northern lands at that time were mired in war. So the empty and peaceful southern lands seemed just the perfect option. Monster raids were rare there, so soil contamination was negligible. And they decided that farming would be a great idea. So he expanded their farmland to the south. Rumors about fertile lands spread and nomads began to gather here from everywhere. The monsters hardly bothered them, and they easily fought off those who came. For a while, everything was fine. This orchard stood at the southernmost point of the new border. As a woman, his wife took the initiative to plant trees and seed even in the most dangerous parts. He remembers how she fed him grapes with her slightly soiled but gentle hands. Their first harvest on this land was modest, but there was nothing sweeter than those fruits in this world. At some point, he began to hope that someday he would be able to move away from the routine of killing monsters and begin to work in the fields, picking fruits to feed his family. He felt the taste of a new life, unfamiliar to him, a simple warrior. But, as one might expect, this did not last long. In the second year of his farming life, information was received about 100 huge monsters rapidly advancing on their city. He quickly returned to the front line. Having said a warm goodbye to his wife and promising her to be careful, he left the farmland. Cheryl closes her eyes with a sad expression on her face, is silent for a few seconds, and says that while approaching the fort, he learned that the monsters were divided into 2 groups. And some of these freaks, having separated from the main group, attacked from the south, where the farms were located. But most of them were heading towards the city. And this is where he had to get out. Turn around and save your wife or fulfill your duty and protect tens of thousands of city residents. A small smile appears on his face, and he asks, "Isn't it difficult to guess what he chose then?" Ash looks at him with a serious expression and says that it was a city. Cheryl agrees and says that all his ancestors chose the same thing he did. From a moral and legal point of view, he did everything right. He defended the walls of the fort and defeated the monsters. It was a long, grueling battle that lasted several days. After that, he immediately hurried to the farms, without any respite. However, he could only find trampled fields and mountains of corpses. Just 12 monsters tore to pieces hundreds of people, and his dear wife was among them. Ash thinks that Margrave Cross has fulfilled his duty to the land of his ancestors at the cost of everything he ever held dear. Cheryl asks who should he blame for this? Uncouth idiots unable to defend the front line without commanders, or one's own decision to stretch the border and forces along it. He looks down with a calm and sad expression on his face and says that he himself is to blame for this. This doesn't make it any easier, but the hardest thing for him is the realization of the fact that he betrayed his wife and chose the city. Even his own daughter called him an idiot. She didn't understand how he could choose the city and not her mother. A few days later, she left him too. Cheryl looks at his very trembling hand and says that this is all he got in the end by devoting his entire life to protecting this place. His wife is dead, his daughter is gone, and he is rotting here all alone. And this is just one example among many others. Ash listens to him carefully and looks at him with a serious expression on his face. Cheryl says he thinks he knows what else this place is called. Ash asks if he means the City of Graves. Cheryl agrees and says that this city stands on corpses, and one day this will force him to make a choice. To protect this city, he will have to pay a high price and sacrifice everything he holds dear. Ash is silent and thinks that it doesn't look like a curse so much as it looks like an inevitable future. Something caused by a number of reasons leading to a bad outcome. Cheryl says his family has carried this sacrifice through generations. But perhaps they've had enough. He wouldn't dare leave this damn job to his daughter. Ash looks at him with a serious expression and says that he got it. So he left the position to protect his daughter from inheriting the post and his fate. Cheryl says that's exactly how it is. He looks at his trembling hand and says that he wants her daughter to get out of here alive and unharmed, so that she can live happily, albeit somewhere far away. Ash thinks that the SSR tank, Evangeline Cross, is the character whose power he desires more than others. The Margrave tries to keep her away from the battlefield. Cheryl pours herself a glass of alcohol and asks the prince. He asks him to help him defend the city, right? He hits the bottle very hard on the table with a loud sound. After that, he looks at him with a serious expression on his face and says that he has been protecting the city for long enough. He even traded the lives of his loved ones for this. Ash looks at him with a serious expression and doesn't say anything, and he says that he should let him go. Ash looks at him and thinks that the Margrave's eyes, which were reflected in his glass, did not shine with pride for the work done to protect the fort. Cheryl says he should let him die in this garden and not on the walls of the fort. Ash thinks that rather, his eyes reflected the bitterness of regret that he did not die with his wife. Cheryl asks, I hope now he understands that he has reasons why he cannot help him. He told him the whole truth as a thank you for keeping him company. And now he must leave and he will give him his last advice. If he happens to be faced with this choice, he should think better so as not to regret it later, as he did. Sometime later on the 5th day of repair work. And there were only 2 days left before the new wave. Ash comes to the wall and says that they are all great. He points to the table and says they can rest a little and eat. The workers were happy that food had been brought to them. The workers loudly say that their prince is doing a great job, giving them water and food. They are very grateful to him for this. Ash looks at them with a confused expression and tells these idiots that they should shut up and eat already. The president of the Masons' Union substituted his mug and agrees with His Highness. Ash pours him water and asks how is it going. The president, with a joyful expression on his face, says that everything is going well. Since he has provided them with enough workers, it seems they will be able to finish on time. The repair is not the most reliable, but the wall will be intact in 2 days. Ash says they work great. He thinks he has dealt with the most difficult part. He turns to the trembling old man and says it's time for them to use it. The president of the Alchemists' Union happily agrees with him and loudly says that they will finally be able to use this. Ash looks at the scroll in his hand and thinks that it is a magical summoning scroll that they found during the last expedition. It can only be used after research in the Alchemist's workshop, and just today it was completed. A system window appears in front of him, which says that he really wants to place a defense turret here. Ash activates this scroll and thinks that of course he wants this. The scroll in his hand disappears, and only a bright magical glow remains. The system notifies that a new player skill is available to him, the magic of summoning a protective turret. Ash looks at the large amount of debris that the workers have collected and thinks that this should be enough. He remembers the remaining chests that he had and thinks that he is finally lucky. He finally got a normal object. He takes out a rank Armana core and thinks that with this thing he will succeed. The system notifies that he must select a place to install a protective turret. Ash clicks on the system window and thinks about it. Maybe he should put it right here. Immediately afterwards, a pile of rubble rises up with the help of magic, and he looks at it with a smile. All these fragments flock in one place and form a turret. Ash stands still and looks at what is happening in front of him. The construction of the protective turret ends, and everyone who is nearby looks at it with surprise. This turret begins to rotate in different directions. Ash claps as he looks at it and says it's great. The president of the Alchemists Union looks at this with great surprise and says that this is a technology of magical architecture that was lost hundreds of years ago. Ash slaps this turret and says that thanks to the efforts of each of them, the defense line becomes stronger every time. They all must continue to work. People are happy about what is happening and shout loudly, and he thinks that this even managed to cheer him up. He smiles and thinks it will be nice if they can continue like this. Their next stop is the blacksmith shop. After some time, Ash in the forge asks how he likes it. The custom-made armor was finally ready, and Lucas, with a joyful expression on his face, says that it couldn't be better. Ash thinks that this armor was made using the monocore of the Phantom Knight. However, this armor is only as strong as a glass. The system window says that this is SR rank 30 level ghost armor. Armor category: protection from 50 to 55 points, strength 12 points. Increases resistance to physical attacks by 33%. The wearer receives a special ghost skill. The first level ghost skill makes the user invulnerable for 5 seconds. Note: invulnerability to any attacks. But for the duration of the ability deprives the owner of the ability to attack. Ash thinks it's a lot more useful than he thought. Lucas holds back tears of joy and tells His Highness that he will use this armor wisely. Ash says that of course he will use it. It's not in vain that he spent money on it. He should use it. He smiles and thinks he almost cried when they took his measurements. He should give him gifts more often. He turns and says that he is grateful to him for this beautiful armor. The president of the Blacksmiths Union smiles and says that he is also grateful to him. He was finally able to work with decent material. He raises his voice and says with a big smile that he's a pleasure to deal with, so he hopes they can work together some more. His Highness can contact him at any time. Ash thinks that upgrading the forge and equipment is extremely important even in the late game. He will definitely be a frequent visitor here. He is about to say something, and Lucas immediately asks what does he want to say. Ash says that they will go to the western part of the city because they need to be present there. He thinks the western part of the fort. The sounds of cannon shots and memory of the dead echoed in the air. They accompanied the fallen on their final journey. All the soldiers who died during the previous defense of the fortress from a wave of monsters. Their comrades were buried under fresh tombstones and a layer of earth. Not many people died. It's difficult for him to judge whether it's good or bad. A choir of many people sing a song, and Ash at this time stands in front of the graves of the dead and thinks that his day passed in such endless bustle. Some time later, he sits on the field next to this cemetery next to Lucas. Ash says he should look at how much money was spent on the funeral. He even organized posthumous compensation. They are approached by Cheryl, who attracts their attention by saying that this is true royal generosity. He must remember, this is the front line of monsters. This place is claiming lives like a giant whirlpool in a storm. Sooner or later, there will come a time when it will no longer be possible to pay off. Ash asks if he came all this way just to say that, or did he just run out of alcohol at home? Cheryl says there is no such thing as too much alcohol. Even he has to shop. However, today he came for a different reason. He visited his former comrades to talk and have a little drink. So, he asked them if they still wanted to defend the city. Ash was surprised by what he said, and with a serious expression on his face asks, what did they tell him? Cheryl says everyone has said they want it, and will defend it as long as it takes. Ash is very happy about this news, and says that this is the best news he has heard all last week. Cheryl says he doesn't know how much use these old men will have, but they're getting ready right now. He came to say that he was transferring leadership into his hands. He also asks that he not waste the lives of these guys. Ash grabs his hand with a happy expression on his face and loudly says that he is very grateful to him. Cheryl is embarrassed by his reaction and says that he shouldn't thank him because it's their decision. Ash thinks that the Margrave was so adamant that he had already despaired of getting anything from him. Who would have thought that he would take it and help him? He says that he did talk to them after all. He can't put into words how grateful he is to him. To be honest, it was very unexpected. Cheryl is silent for a few seconds as she looks at him and says that he did everything he could. He must take care of this city. He wishes him luck. Ash says with a happy expression that the Empire will not forget his help. He personally vows to give it his all. He would definitely visit him whenever he needed his wisdom. Cheryl says in a dissatisfied voice that he should already let him drink in peace at home. He leaves and Ash loudly says that he drinks too much. It would be better if she brought him some medicinal herbs. Cheryl loudly says that he can keep it and bring him normal alcohol. He looks at him with a small smile and takes a deep breath. He turns away, starts to walk away, and waves at him. Ash watches him leave and thinks that he most likely went back to his garden. He wanted to stop him. Even as an old man, Margrave Cross is an excellent commander who successfully defended the border all his life. He would be very useful for defense. But he has lost too much. He looks at him with a sad expression and thinks that he has no right to stop him. He should let him go. Maybe next time they can talk more. Maybe he will even give him some military advice. However, at that time he did not yet imagine that the next time would never come. 2 days later, early morning. The wall repair was finally completed. The president of the Masons' Union, with a tired and frightened expression on his face, says that a couple of places were not repaired very well because they were in a hurry, but he promises that the wall will be able to fulfill its duty. Ash pats him on the shoulder and says that they did a great job. They don't need more from them. He thinks all preparations are complete. Ammunition is ready. The soldiers are ready, and they have 300 veterans. He heard that initially there were about 1,000 of them. Ash smiles and thinks that. However, he doesn't dare ask for more. The protective turret begins to rotate in different directions. He kisses this turret with a joyful expression on his face and thinks that this pleases him the most. He looks at the entrance to the city and thinks that, in addition, there are already barricades with a death zone. Everything must be perfect. He smiles and thinks that these freaks might try to attack if they dare. At the same moment, a guy in a mask, who was in the city under the lake, stops far from the city. Some time later, a soldier on a horse gallops towards the entrance to the city. He runs inside and says that he has an urgent message from intelligence. Monsters are coming. Ash stands on a high wall and sees from afar many monsters running towards the city. A system window appears in front of him, in which it is written that 10 minutes are left before the start of the second wave. Ash turns around and loudly says that the monsters are already close. They need to be vigilant. The soldiers he addresses simultaneously loudly agree with him. Ash thinks they are ready for this. For all the time that he played this game, there have never been better conditions than now at the beginning of the battle. He looks forward with a smile and thinks that these freaks can only try to come here. In the dust that rises due to the wind, there is a man in a mask who looks at the city from afar. Ash was very surprised when he saw this masked man. He looks at him intently and wonders who this guy is. Lucas, with a worried expression on his face, asks His Highness, "Is something wrong?" Ash points his finger into the distance and asks if he sees the person over there. He does not have time to finish his question because he noticed that this person was not visible. Lucas looks around with a serious expression on his face and asks where he saw him. He doesn't see anything. Ash turns around and loudly asks Damien if he saw a person there. He uses his skill in front of his eyes and tells His Highness that there is no one there. Ash is surprised by this, but doesn't say anything about it. He turns around and, with a worried expression on his face, wonders if he really imagined it. He hopes that this is so. But what if it didn't seem to him and there really was someone there? But who could it even be? He notices that the ground under his feet has begun to tremble, and this means that the monsters are already coming. He clenches his hand tightly into a fist and thinks that he needs to remain calm. No matter what it seemed to him or no matter how many of them there were, there was only one thing he could do now. Ash looks ahead with a serious expression on his face and thinks that he should stop them. He says loudly that they must prepare the cannons. He orders to open fire and the soldiers immediately begin firing with all their guns. They continue to fire many shells from the cannons. Huge rats that were running towards the city notice all these shells that are flying in their direction. These projectiles begin to hit the crowds of these monsters running next to the wooden walls. The projectiles continue to hit the wooden-walled hallway with loud noises, and Ash says that everything is going well. A system window appears next to him, in which the number of kills is written, and this counter increases very quickly. He thinks that the first salvo managed to kill almost 100 rats. He smiles and says they should continue. He thinks that these monsters are superior only in numbers, but in general, the rats are very weak. Their large numbers will play a cruel joke on them, because they form a crowd. As you know, it is much easier to conduct barrage fire on a crowd, which will allow you to hit as many targets as possible. Ash looks at the system window in front of him and thinks that about 30 minutes have passed since the battle began. He sees that they have killed 924 large level 5 sewer rats and thinks that if things continue like this, they will easily cope with this. Suddenly rats begin to crawl over the wooden walls. Ash notices this through his spyglass and loudly asks what it is. He looks at these monsters and wonders, do they use corpses for this? The supports that held these walls begin to collapse under the weight of these rats, and he thinks that this is very bad. The supports have completely broken, and Ash thinks that these piles of corpses are so large that they create a springboard for their relatives. This is all very bad. Bypassing the death zone was not part of his plans. He turns around and says loudly that they must spread out the fire and expand the kill zone. The ballistic squad must open fire. He thinks there is nothing wrong with it. The killing zone is located far from the fort walls, and there is a barricade on the ground. So far, everything is going well. Many cannons and ballistas continue to actively fire at the horde of monsters who are quickly running towards the fort. The rats dodge shots from the ballistas, and Ash thinks that he still didn't take something into account. The worried soldiers loudly tell His Highness that these monsters are too fast. It is difficult for them to hit them. Ash looks at this with a displeased expression on his face and loudly says that these damn rats are too agile. He wonders why he didn't think about this beforehand. All four-legged monsters are very fast. Now, because of this, many more rats will reach the walls of the fort than he originally expected. Suddenly, the protective turret begins to glow brightly and move quickly in different directions. This cannon starts shooting many magical projectiles that fly in different directions. Ash was very surprised by this and thinks that he also has a turret. The huge rats in which these magical projectiles are flying begin to scream very loudly. The shells fired by the turret explode very strongly and scatter these monsters in different directions. Ash looks at this with great surprise and thinks that it was incredibly cool. It is obvious that the turrets are simply created for defense. He sees many rats that survived after this attack and thinks that, however, no matter how cool the turret is, it cannot cover the entire battlefield. Moreover, the turret has already used up all its ammo and gone into reload mode. After that, he looks at the battlefield and thinks that there are still too many monsters. The defensive line begins to rapidly shrink. The fragments of a huge sword that lie near the walls are doing their job, but the rats will still definitely reach the walls of the fort. It's only a matter of time. He is very worried about what is happening and thinks that close combat cannot be avoided. And this is the most undesirable turn of events. There will be more victims. Suddenly, shots from the cannons begin to hit the rats more actively, which are approaching very quickly. What is happening is very surprising to Ash, who is watching everything that is happening. He looks at the many shots and wonders what's going on. All of these shots are absolutely perfect. He turns very sharply towards the cannon and wonders who does this anyway. The veterans who were persuaded to come by Cheryl help the soldiers shoot, and one of them asks if he told him this right. He's doing great. The joyful soldier loudly says that he really managed to get there. He is very grateful to him. Ash thinks that the Silver Army is experienced warriors, seasoned in hot battles. Their presence has a much greater effect than he thought. Another veteran loudly says that they cannot sleep. They will be able to rest in the next world. They must act quickly before the monsters reach the city. Another veteran says that it's okay if he misses. He should keep shooting. Even just shooting can help. Ash looks at this and thinks that they are giving good advice and keeping the soldiers' morale up. One of the veterans tells His Highness that he can leave the soldiers to them. They will be able to take good care of them. Ash looks at him with a smile and thinks that it seems like they can be relied on. So far, the defense is still going well. Thanks to the help of the Silver Army, they were able to more effectively defend against rats. Besides, his best fighters are all busy with something right now. Lucas loudly says that the left front must expand the affected area. They must aim further and more carefully. Ash thinks Lucas is in charge of the front lines. He only outlines the defense strategy, and he already gives more detailed orders, in accordance with his instructions. Yet his knowledge of military terminology is lame on both legs. As a result, most military personnel think that he is talking nonsense. However, Lucas miraculously understands what he is trying to achieve and gives orders that the soldiers can understand. Ash looks at him with a smile and thinks what a great protagonist. He turns around and thinks that Damien is still shooting. He does it slowly, but accurately. He gets rid of rodents that get too close to the walls with precise shots to the head. He's good at sniping, an ability that might not seem all that valuable in the midst of such carnage. However, any reduction in the number of enemies matters. Ash looks at him with a smile and thinks he's doing a great job. He turns around and thinks that Lily is in charge of the artifacts at this time. She loudly says that gravity artifact number 1 needs to be used in 3 minutes. They must also prepare gravity artifact number 2. Ash thinks that looking at how energetically he gives orders and rushes in different directions. Lily turns around and notices that he is looking at her with an inspired expression on his face. She winks at him and gives him a thumbs up, and Ash thinks it's like she's trying to show him that he should leave her alone while she's working. He turns away and thinks that Lily attacked the wrong person. He will still need her directly on the battlefield. He turns around with a smile and thinks that finally, the last member of his squad, Jupiter. She lies on the bed with a glass of alcohol in her hand and says that they are all great and doing a good job. Ash looks at this with a surprised expression and wonders, is she just lying there? He looks at her with a very frightening expression on his face and thinks that he, of course, himself told her to rest and be on guard for now, but she somehow settled in too well here. Jupiter starts to get up and says that her back hurts a lot. She was so tired of collecting mana that even her back began to hurt. Ash looks at her with a smile, but is still angry and thinks that he would tell her who she is. But now is not the time to quarrel with the most powerful magician. He asks where she got tired so early. She still has time to get tired. Jupiter raises his glass of alcohol and says that he is right. It's worth drinking for. Ash thinks this really pisses him off. By the way, thanks to the hard work of everyone, with the exception of Jupiter, the defense is going well. If you close your eyes to the fact that the rats are approaching. The defense turret recharged and fired a very strong shot. A lot of magic missiles hit the crowds of rats, and Ash thinks that he completely forgot to mention the incredible power of his turret. He has a happy expression on his face and says that he is so proud of this turret. He thinks that at this rate, they will quickly be able to fight back. He looks at the battlefield with a smile and wonders if this is the first time they will win without any damage. He notices a human silhouette in the distance and wonders what it is. He sees a masked man standing very far away and thinks that he is the same freak as he was then. So it wasn't a hallucination. He uses the map creation skill and a system window appears in front of him. He is very surprised when he notices something and thinks that it is very bad. Could this be an enemy NPC invasion? And this happens in the second wave. Anything can happen during an attack. Any variables make the game more interesting. And one of these events is the invasion of an enemy NPC. Be it an NPC from the kingdom under the lake, or simply a raid from the Empire's enemies. Any little thing can bury all hopes of a successful passage. Not on the second level. It's not time for that yet. This developer is a complete idiot. He would have expressed everything to him, but this freak, as always, hid somewhere at the crucial moment. Ash calls Damien loudly and asks. He can see him too, right? They both look at the masked man who is standing very far away. He uses his skill, sees this man, agrees and asks, is this some kind of traveling artist? Ash, with a very worried look on his face, loudly says that he should kill him right now. Damien was very surprised by this and loudly asks what he said. But this is an ordinary person, isn't it? Ash says loudly that it doesn't matter. He should just kill him while he can. He thinks that he is sure that this is an NPC from the kingdom under the lake. He is familiar with this jester costume. Now he remembered who it was. Ash points to this man and says that he must be killed before he plays the flute. Damien looks at him with great shock. He holds his crossbow with trembling hands and wants to say something to His Highness. Ash asks loudly. He remembers that he is his weapon, right? He must do as he says. If he doesn't want more people to die, he has to kill him as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the masked man begins to play his flute and releases strong sound waves. Ash was very shocked when he heard this. He turns to the side and looks into the distance. A masked man plays his flute and keeps a watchful eye on the city. All the rats heard this loud sound and turn in its direction. All the soldiers stand still and look at the huge crowd of rats who have stopped their advance. They look at it in surprise and ask what is happening. Why did the rats stop? The masked man continues to play his flute and releases sound waves, and this causes the rats to go berserk and start making loud noises. After this, they immediately begin to run very quickly in one large crowd towards the gate leading to the city. Someone says loudly that they all rushed in the same direction. Ash asks loudly, where are these rats running? Lucas, with a very worried look on his face, says loudly that they are heading towards the center of the wall. This is the place they recently renovated. Ash raises his hand and loudly says that the ballistas and cannons must correct course. They must fire the most powerful salvo at once. Immediately after this, all cannons simultaneously fire at the monsters, which quickly run towards the wall. Ash looks at everything that is happening and thinks that this is very bad. They don't have time. The change of direction was too sudden. The rats run very quickly towards the wall, making loud noises. After this, one of the rats jumps forward very quickly, making loud noises. The soldiers stopped shooting and looked at what was happening below. Ash looks down with a very surprised expression on his face. He sees the rat slamming into the wall with all his might, and he wonders what they are even doing. Several more rats run very quickly towards the wall, and he realizes that these rats are ramming the wall with their heads. Soldiers who were very surprised by what was happening and loudly say that they are distraught. Why do they do this? Ash looks at the many rats crashing in and thinks that they only recently finished fixing this wall. He asks how dare these sewer freaks do this. He thinks that they finished the repairs at best a couple of hours ago. The workers left very tired because the deadlines were merciless, but they still failed to perfectly repair this wall. Their goal was simply to fill the gap, which means that cracks are inevitable. Sewer rats tend to get into these cracks. They bang their heads against the wall, scratch the stone with their claws, and chew their way through the wall. This is the ideal strategy for them in this situation for monsters like rats. Ash looks at this with a very angry and displeased expression on his face and says that this is very bad. He looks at the masked man, who stands very far away, and thinks that for some reason it seems to him that this freak is now laughing at them. NPC from the kingdom under the lake. A jester who can control monsters with a flute. The players called him the Pied Piper of Hamelin. He needs to get rid of it urgently. Ash turns around and loudly tells Damien that he must shoot him immediately. He holds the crossbow in his very trembling hands and looks at this man who is standing very far away. This masked man continues to stand still and adjusts his hat. Ash calls Damien loudly with a very worried and angry look on his face. The masked man suddenly disappears from their field of vision. He puts away his crossbow and Ash looks at the battlefield with a worried expression on his face and says nothing. Damien begins to cry, apologizes to His Highness, and says with a worried expression that even if it is the enemy, he cannot shoot the person. Ash remains silent with a serious expression on his face and thinks that he can understand him. After all, he belongs to the healer class. But among their enemies, there will be many people. In the future, he will have to fight against them. If this remains a problem for him, then he will be of very little use on the battlefield. He puts his hand on Damien's shoulder and says that they will return to this conversation a little later. He approaches the edge of the wall, looks at the crowds of rats that are running towards the wall, and thinks that for now they have a more serious problem. Ash loudly tells the soldiers to continue firing their cannons and bows. All the soldiers do what he says and continue shooting. He turns around and tells Jupiter that a job has appeared for her. She must deal with it quickly. She smiles and creates a powerful lightning bolt from her hand and says that this is just what she was waiting for. Where should she shoot? Ash points with his hand and says loudly that she should attack the rats in that direction. Jupiter immediately uses his magic and releases very strong lightning across the area. Ash turns around and, with a serious expression on his face, loudly tells Lily that she must prepare the fire artifacts. She must use all artifacts to their full potential. She looks at him, with a serious expression on her face, loudly agrees with His Highness, and loudly says that they must activate the fire artifacts. Several magicians immediately begin to charge several large artifacts that stand at the edge of the wall. Lily orders to open fire, and the magicians immediately activate the artifacts, from which fire begins to fly out. Magicians and soldiers use all sorts of methods to destroy the monsters that are running towards the wall. Ash looks at this with a smile and says that's great, everything is going quite well. He wonders if he really thought that hitting one point would help. Ash looks at what is happening and thinks that he can create a death zone even under the wall. He laughs with a very evil look on his face and asks loudly, did they really think they could break through the walls of the fort? He is surprised when he notices the system window appearing in front of him. Ash thinks that the name of the wave boss, which was previously hidden under question marks, is now revealed. In the system window, it is written that this is an elite Ratman champion of the 30th level. Ash thinks that since the name is now revealed, it means that they have already appeared on the battlefield. Moreover, they brought with them even more sewer rats. They are trying to break through the fort wall. Ash looks at this with a worried expression and says that they have to stop them. He sees a huge rat running very fast towards the fort. He turns to the soldiers and loudly asks why they stood still. They should attack faster. They need to stop these monsters immediately. The soldiers immediately begin firing their cannons. Their shots hit a huge rat that runs towards them, but this does not even slow down this monster. Ash thinks that this rat is at least twice the size of the one they met in the dungeon. He looks at one of the three huge monsters who is running towards the fort and thinks that one blow from this monster on the wall of the fort will be enough to destroy it. The defense turret has recharged and fires another salvo. Several magical projectiles that were fired from the turret fly at the huge monster that was in front. All these projectiles hit the huge monster, and it does a lot of damage to one of the three bosses. This huge rat falls to the ground due to its wounds, from which blood flows. Ash looks at the battlefield, where many sewer rat bodies lie. He is very worried about what he sees in front of him and loudly says that they must prepare again. They need to get rid of the ratmen first. They must fire all rounds. The soldiers obey and fire many shots from their cannons. Ash says loudly that they should use mana artifacts. They must restore Jupiter's mana. She immediately begins to smile when she feels the effects of the artifacts, which immediately begin to restore her mana supply. With a very angry expression on her face and a smile, she says that she will now destroy these monsters. Immediately after this, she releases many lightning bolts that strike the rats from the sky. Ash looks at what is happening and thinks that her power was great. Her attacks cause rats' bodies to melt like beeswax. The huge ratman continues to run to the side, even under the influence of the lightning attack she uses. This surprised Jupiter very much, and she loudly asks how is this even possible. Ash thinks that this attack was too scattered, and the Ratman champions were able to avoid significant damage. He turns around, calls Lily loudly, and says that they must use fire artifacts. She was surprised by what he was saying and asked what he said. All artifacts should now cool down. Ash says loudly that he doesn't care at all. Lily was very surprised by this and looks at him with a shocked expression on her face. She begins to use her fire magic with a dissatisfied expression on her face and loudly asks why she is doing all this. Her fire magic hits one of the ratmen. This stopped the monster and made him scream loudly due to pain. This magical flame spreads around this ratman who stands still. Lily stops using her magic and this huge monster dies due to the fire damage received. But the last ratman appears from behind the boss and quickly runs towards the fort. Ash, with a very worried expression on his face, says loudly that there is only one ratman left. They must kill it. Lucas channels his energy into the sword, which he holds with one hand. He throws his sword very hard from the wall of the fort and leaves a trail of energy from the flying sword. With this throw, he hits the ratman's neck, and it begins to scream very loudly because of the pain. Lucas continues to use his energy to control the sword and loudly says that they must shoot now. Ash turns to Damien, who is standing next to him, and loudly says that he must shoot. After that, he immediately uses his ability to hit this monster for sure. He makes a very strong shot and magical energy emanates from his arrow. With this shot, he hit the ratman right in the eye, who was stunned by the sword that Lucas threw. Ash, who is watching this, loudly says that they have won. He does not have time to finish because he noticed that the ratman survived after all these attacks and continues to run towards the wall. What was happening surprised Ash very much, and with a surprised expression on his face, he wondered why this monster still has the strength to move. This ratman continues to run very quickly towards the wall, putting his shoulder forward to attack. This huge monster crashes into the wall and breaks through with a shoulder smash. Cheryl stands in the distance, watching the siege of the fort, and thinks that there was something strange about all this. As a commander who had dedicated his entire life to fighting monsters, he felt this intuitively. The monsters began to attack somehow differently. Not at all like when he himself was a lord. Firstly, there are many more of them, and secondly, they have a hierarchy. Tactics began to be visible in their formation and method of combat. Besides, Prince Ash has already survived 3 similar battles. He could understand why the new landlord had turned to him for help in the first place. But it turns out he did a great job himself. It's even hard to believe that they talked about him as a drunkard and an idiot. However, things take a turn for the worse. Cheryl touches his shield and spear, which are hanging on his horse, and wonders if he should interfere. He remembers how the last defense of this fort ended for him last time. He closes his eyes and thinks that he shouldn't interfere there. He goes towards the forest and thinks that he is already retired. There is no point in him getting involved in this pointless battle. He can die in the garden, as he wanted. Suddenly he hears very loud sounds, which shocked him and forced him to stop. He turns around and notices a ratman who has made his way through the gate leading into the city. Cheryl looks at this with a shocked expression and thinks that he doesn't want to fight anymore. He, with a very serious and worried expression on his face, thinks that he should return to his garden. His wife must wait. This time he will fulfill his duty to her. At the same time, on the wall of the fort, Ash turns around with a worried look on his face and says loudly that they must begin evacuating the townspeople immediately. Although the wall was destroyed by a huge ratman, ordinary sewer rats had not yet managed to get inside. Ash looks towards the monsters and thinks that the sewer rats are advancing and they are already very close. He loudly says that in addition to rifle squads and artillery, everyone who is capable of close combat must immediately go to the breakthrough point. He turns around and loudly tells Lucas that he must take command of the swordsmen. Shooters must continue to fire. They should strive to create a fiery barrier in front of the breach in the wall. Jupiter gets complete freedom of action. She can attack as soon as she wants. She needs to kill as many of these monsters as possible. She may not spare mana, because it can be restored with artifacts. It should deliver the most powerful blow. Jupiter is breathing heavily due to fatigue, but with a serious expression on his face, he says that she will do as His Highness orders. Ash goes to Lily, calls her by name and asks what artifacts they still have. She says they only have acceleration left. He asks, "What about the fire artifact?" Lily looks at him with a very displeased expression on her face and says that she still needs 10 minutes to recharge. Ash turns around and says that for now she should use haste on the fighting soldiers, and once the fire artifact is ready, she should use it. He returns to his seat and calls Damien's name. He stops and is surprised when he notices something strange. He, with a crossbow in his hands, turns to His Highness and with a terribly guilty expression on his face asks what is required of him. Ash remembers everything that happened earlier and thinks that most likely he now thinks that it was his fault. He hits him on the forehead with his finger and Damien screams out of surprise. Ash looks at him with a kind smile and says that they still need him. Damien is surprised by this, tears well up in his eyes, and he wants to say something to His Highness. Ash puts a hand on his shoulder to encourage him and tells him that they can all make mistakes and that's okay. The main thing is that he should not lose confidence. He thinks that a shooter who doesn't miss is too important a combat unit. He says that just so he knows, his presence alone gives hope. He must believe in himself as much as he believes in him. Ash was touched by what he said and looks at him and agrees with his highness. Ash says it's better this way. What he needs to do now is provide the last line of defense. He must shoot those rats that break through the soldiers and rush into the city. Damien looks at him with a very serious expression and tells his highness that he understands and will do his best. Ash nods at him and thinks that he can only hope that everyone will cope with the task. He stands on the edge of the wall and watches the monsters quickly run towards the hole in the wall. He says loudly that the monsters are starting to break through. Everyone should be ready for this. The soldiers who stand at the destroyed gate to the city look at the hole with worried faces. They see how many monsters are already beginning to climb the body of the killed ratman, which lies in this hole. One of the rats, which was the first to sneak into the city, immediately receives a swift blow from the sword. Lucas, who uses his new sword, was the one who cut off the head of this rat. He lowers his sword into the blade of which he directs his energy. He turns to the soldiers and says loudly that this passage is quite narrow, so the monsters will not be able to penetrate all at once. They must remain calm and kill the rats one by one. The soldiers who stood in front of him loudly agree with him, and they are filled with determination, and their morale rises. Ash looks at this from the wall where he is standing. Something attracts his attention, and he wonders what is happening there. He notices that the number of rats that are breaking through begins to increase. He notices that these rats are gnawing the body of the ratman, and realizes that they are slowly increasing their opening. What kind of sewer rats are these? They look more like moles. Lily says loudly that the fire artifact is fully charged and ready to use. She is about to say that she is ready to use the artifact, but something stops her and she begins to scream loudly. Ash turns sharply to her, calls her by name and asks what happened to her there. He notices that several rats were able to climb the tower and are already killing several magicians commanded by Lily. One of the dying magicians crawls up to her and wants to say something, and this frightened her very much. Ash very quickly runs to her aid, punches one of the rats very hard and loudly says that this is a blow from the prince. In the jackpot system window, it is written that the damage of this attack is 15 points. From such a strong blow, this rat was thrown out of the wall. Ash clenches his fist tightly, from which smoke comes out after the blow, and loudly asks how these monsters were able to climb the wall. As a huge army of rats flee into the city through a hole in the wall, some of them climb up the wall using their claws. Ash is very angry about what is happening, and her tears begin to flow. She attacks these monsters with her fire magic with tears in her eyes, and loudly says that they must come here. She will kill every one of them. Ash is very surprised by what is happening and thinks that activating the artifact without her squad will be problematic. At the same time, there is a hole in the wall. One of the soldiers was shocked that the rat very quickly cut off his hand, and he could not move for several seconds because of what had happened. This soldier, like the others, begins to scream loudly because of the injuries they receive. Ash looks at this and thinks that there are also casualties among the troops blocking the passage from below. The shooters were supposed to help them, but they had their own problems. With one blow, he defeats another rat that had climbed onto the wall. He looks at what is happening with a tired expression on his face and thinks that at this rate, the damage may be irreparable. One of the veterans who killed a rat with his sword is very surprised when he notices something that attracted his attention. He asks loudly if this is the former Margrave. Ash was very surprised by what he heard and loudly asks what did he just say. He turns towards the field and notices a very bright glow that comes far from the city. He sees Cheryl, who in his armor gallops towards the city and raises his huge spear above his head. He gallops towards the city with a determined expression on his face and loudly tells these monsters that they must come here. The rats that are standing outside stop and turn to him as the sun's rays reflect off his spear. Ash was very surprised by what happened and thinks that he drew the attention of these monsters to himself. All the rats that were standing outside the city turn to him and scream very loudly. Cheryl stands calmly in place and sees how all these monsters turn to him, and Ash wonders what he is even going to do. He loudly calls the Margrave and asks what he is doing there. He could die because of this. Cheryl doesn't answer him and looks at the army of monsters that stands in front of him with a serious expression on her face. Ash thinks that Margrave Cross has been fighting monsters all his life. The city in which he was born was a stronghold of protection against monsters. His father left very early, bequeathing the title of Margrave to his son. And, despite his young age and the burden of being a landlord, he killed monsters every day. No matter what monster attempted his life, he was always one step ahead. His world was simple and understandable. A girl with white hair and a joyful expression greeted my lord, and he thinks that it was so until the day this woman appeared in the city. Young Cheryl was silent for a few seconds as he looked at her and asked what she intended to do here. The girl put some flowers in his hand and tells my lord that she wants to sell flowers. It was just a merchant asking permission to open her own store. The Margrave was perplexed by the type of activity she chose. Cheryl says this is the front line of the monsters. Here you need swords, spears, arrows, cannons, and the like. Does she think that someone will buy flowers from her? Besides, these flowers fade quickly anyway. The girl with a joyful expression on her face tells my lord that people need flowers. Of course, they fade quickly, but that is their value. The life of flowers may be fleeting, but it is truly beautiful. Then Cheryl didn't understand her at all. At first he even suspected and thought that she was a foreign spy. He went to a flower shop, and the girl tells my lord that he came here again. Cheryl looks around the store and says he's never seen flowers like these before. To convict her of espionage, he came to her store every day for evidence. As a result, he learned to distinguish all types and scents of flowers. I even learned the intricate names of these flowers. However, something still eluded him. It was an understanding of the nature of beauty. A year later, Cheryl Cross proposed to this woman. Currently, after Ash tried to convince him, and he looked at the monsters in front of him with a serious expression on his face. He gritted his teeth with a serious expression on his face, galloped on his horse towards the army of monsters, and screamed very loudly. Without an ounce of fear or doubt, he headed towards the huge number of monsters that were about to attack him. A very long time ago. Cheryl returned to his house with a very worried and tired look on his face. He sees the maid and his wife, who is lying on the bed with a small child in her arms. She says with tears and a joyful expression that he should look. This is his daughter. Cheryl Cross, who had returned from another battle, covered in sweat, blood, and dirt, was carefully handed a tiny baby. She was named Evangelina, and his wife asks if she is not beautiful, matching her name. Cheryl still didn't understand, so he couldn't answer her. His daughter grabbed his finger with her small hand, and he looked at her with a surprised expression on his face. Cheryl was silently perplexed. Why does this small and fragile creature, in whose weak body life barely burns, make his heart beat so fast? While he was killing monsters on the front lines, like recently, his world was simple and understandable. But then suddenly everything turned upside down. Currently, Ash says loudly that all survivors must regroup. They must tell the rifle squad not to shoot, because they could hit the Margrave. They should only shoot rats if they are far from him. The soldiers to whom he said this immediately agreed with him. Ash walks to the edge of the wall and loudly calls out to Lucas, which immediately attracts his attention. He says loudly with a worried expression on his face that he must gather a squad of the strongest soldiers capable of standing outside the walls of the fort. Their task is to save the Margrave. Lucas looks at him with a serious and calm expression and tells His Highness that this is not so. He is the one saving them now. Thanks to his provocation, they can attack the enemy from the rear. This is their chance to deal with the rats. They must destroy the monsters and return with the Margrave. Ash says loudly that they should do just that, preferably quickly. Lucas immediately agrees with him, and after some time the gates of the city opened. He raises the sword above his head and loudly says that they must go forward. They must kill all these monsters and get their savior out of there. He screams loudly and leads a huge army on horseback to the Margrave, who is fighting the monsters. Ash looks at this with a very worried expression on his face and really hopes that they will make it in time. at the same time. Cheryl tightly grips her spear with her hand, which was completely covered in blood. He jumps on the monsters with a very determined expression and screams loudly. He rushes into the crowd of rats on his horse and delivers a very strong blow with his spear while monsters surround him. He coughs up blood from his wounds and thinks that he doesn't understand anything. Several monsters run very quickly towards him and are immediately about to attack. Cheryl, with a very angry look on her face, throws a very strong blow with her shield and defeats this monster. However, he himself cannot understand why he does all this. He promised his late wife that he would meet his end at her grave, but it seems he can't even keep that word. He rides alone against an army of rats and wonders why he got involved in the battle for this damned city again. Several rats, which jumped high, fly towards him and hit the shield. Also, these monsters crash into his head and knock his helmet off, and he thinks that he still doesn't understand anything. His helmet falls to the ground, and he thinks that all his life he tried to understand, but still could not. Cheryl fell from his horse, stuck his spear into the ground for support, and thinks there was only one thing he knew for sure. His body is shaking very much due to the wounds he received, but he still continues to rise. He runs with all his determination towards the army of monsters with weapons in his hands and screams very loudly. He is immersed in warm memories and thinks that Flower's daughter, their fragile lives need to be protected from monsters. And that's exactly what he does best, killing monsters. Cheryl begins to cry and loudly says that this is his house and his daughter's house. It's their little world. He faces these monsters in battle with tears in his eyes and loudly says that he will not allow anyone to cross the threshold. Do they understand this? These rats deal very strong blows and destroy the armor that he was wearing. Cheryl is in great pain. His eyes are bloodshot, and he growls loudly out of anger. He knew that no matter how many gardens he grew, no matter how many monsters he killed, he will no longer be able to return the old time back. All he knows is to fight monsters, so he will raise his spear again and again. Cheryl, as in her youth, bursts into the crowd of monsters and delivers a very strong blow with her spear with a very angry expression on her face. He defeats the monsters one by one with his spear and thinks that he will do this as many times as required of him. Margrave Cross stood to the death, gritting his teeth, unleashing all his fury on the enemy. Blood flows down his spear and drips onto the ground, and Cheryl wonders why it's so quiet here. He stands alone in front of the walls of the fort while everything was very dark around him and wonders why the monsters stopped attacking. He breathes heavily due to fatigue and wonders if he has already died. Lucas approaches him, bringing a bright light and breaking the silence by calling Margrave Cross. He looks at Cheryl with a serious expression on his face and says that all the monsters have already been killed and the battle is over. This surprised the Margrave very much, and he notices bright rays of light that fall on him. He sees Lucas in front of him, behind whom there are many soldiers. He tells the Margrave with respect in his voice that he can now rest. Cheryl, who received many wounds from monsters and lost his arm in this battle, stands still and looks forward with a surprised expression on his face. He lets go of his spear and it falls to the ground with a loud sound. Some time later, Lucas and his squad stand in front of Ash. They all make a gesture and he calls out to His Highness. He says with a serious but sad expression that unfortunately they were late. Ash looks at him with a serious expression on his face and breathes heavily. He walks past many soldiers who stand in front of him and show the same gesture. He is very surprised when he notices something in front of him. He sees many soldiers standing around Damien, who uses his magic to heal Cheryl, who is lying on the ground. Ash calls his name, after which he raises his head and looks at the prince with a very sad expression on his face. He lowers his head and waves as a sign that he can no longer be helped. Ash bites his lip hard out of sadness and the fact that he understood this hint. He takes out a large potion, walks towards them, and thinks that he has a high-quality potion that fell out of the last reward chest. Maybe at least this could help him. Cheryl looks at him with a calm expression and says he can forget about it. It is impossible to cure such wounds with a potion. It will only take longer for him to die. Ash loudly calls the Margrave and wants to say something, but Cheryl interrupts him and says that it would be better if he helps him up, otherwise he can't see anything anymore. The clouds in the sky begin to dissipate, and the rays of the sun illuminate the area near the fort. Ash lifts up Cheryl, who asks him if the battle is over. He agrees with the Margrave and says that his contribution to the victory is immeasurable. Cheryl looks at the fort, coughs, and says that the wall was broken after all. Ash agrees with him and says that, however, not a single monster has broken into the city. Everyone inside is safe now. Cheryl looks at him and says that's good news. He looks away because he heard someone crying. He looks at his comrades who are wiping their tears and asks why are they so sad. Cheryl looks at them with a small smile and calmly says that this is a war against monsters. There is no way to avoid losses. It was just his turn, and they need not mourn him. They would rather think of themselves. They should be happy that they won and were able to survive. Cheryl looks up at the sky and says that this is a city of graves. Those who died in battle are buried here from time to time. He smiles and says that only thanks to these graves can people continue to live peacefully for some time. If you always mourn the fallen, then life will turn into endless funerals. Of course, a decent funeral is good, but he must make sure that there are positive moments in the lives of his people. Ash looks at him with a serious expression and says that he will definitely do it. Cheryl says people need hope to continue living, so that if anyone is destined to die, it will be someone like him who has lost all hope. He wants the prince to promise him something. Ash tells the Margrave that he can say it. He will do everything in his power to fulfill his request. Cheryl looks at him and says in a calm voice that if his daughter ever comes back here, he should tell her that her father is very sorry for what happened. His hand drops, and with the last of his strength, he says that he must tell her that she should live freely, the way she herself wants. Ash says that he will definitely convey these words to her. Cheryl says he won't ask for more. He apologizes to his wife and says that he was never able to fulfill his promise. About the garden and their daughter, and all this in general. Ash takes his hand and says that he shouldn't talk like that, because he protected the world. Not only now, but throughout my life. He protected his people on this battlefield. He looks at him with a serious and regretful expression and says that they are all indebted to him. Cheryl didn't answer him. He looks at the sky with eyes in which life is fading away and apologizes for the fact that in the end he didn't do anything. He didn't answer Ash because he no longer heard what he said to him. Suddenly he remembered something. He takes out from his pocket a bag of dried fruits that the Margrave recently gave him. Ash didn't understand then why he was fussing over it, considering how tasteless it was. Perhaps it was all for this moment. He puts the dried fruit into the dying Cheryl's mouth, and he begins to bite it. He remembers the past and says that there really is nothing sweeter in the world than these grapes. He looks up with a happy expression and took his last breath. At the same moment, the bell suddenly rang. This meant that the monster attack was over and evacuation was no longer necessary. Ash looks at Cheryl's dead body and thinks he doesn't understand it. A man who lost everything to protect this city. A man who hated his business so much that he refused to pass it on to his successors along with the title. What made him change his mind and return at the last moment? What did he decide to fight for, and why did he die? What kind of crazy war is this in which so many people are forced to sacrifice themselves for the sake of victory? He looks down and with a sad expression on his face, tells the Margrave that it is a heavy cross to defend these lands. He looks at his happy expression and says that this is very hard. He sits like this for some more time, surrounded by soldiers and complete silence. System windows appear in which it is written that the second wave has been reflected. He receives a reward, which is placed in his inventory. The level MVP becomes Lucas SSR rank. Character losses, Guest Cheryl Cross SR rank.